The wealthiest investors refused to lend money to friends because Solomon understood something most people discover only after relationships collapse. Debt does not create connection. It creates control. The borrower becomes servant to the lender. That is not wisdom speaking. That is war being declared inside your own household. You are about to discover why the wealthiest man in recorded history built his entire financial teaching on one brutal principle: avoid the slavery of owing. This is not theory. This is survival mathematics written 3,000 years ago and proven in every bankruptcy court today. At the end, a prayer waits to break the cycle in your own life. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 7 says, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." Notice the language, not servant, slave. Solomon chose that word deliberately. He watched kingdoms fall because kings borrowed gold to fight wars they could not afford. He saw families torn apart when brothers loaned silver and demanded repayment during famine. The moment money moves between two people who share affection, the relationship changes. One person now holds power. The other holds obligation. That imbalance does not heal. It festers. This is why ancient Jewish wisdom treats lending with terrifying seriousness. The Torah commands lending to the needy as a sacred duty in Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 7 through 8, but it absolutely forbids charging interest to a brother. Why this specific prohibition? Because the moment you charge interest, you transform a relationship into a transaction. You turn help into business. The wisdom keepers understood human nature better than modern psychology ever will. When you lend to someone you love and track every payment, you create an unspoken ledger. Every dinner you share, every conversation you have, that debt sits between you like a third person at the table. The borrower feels shame. The lender feels resentment. Both deny it. Both feel it. In fact, the Jewish concept of gemach frames lending as charity, not investment. If the borrower cannot repay, the wisdom is to convert it to a gift or forgive it entirely, rather than enforcing the slavery dynamic Solomon warned against. This is not weakness. This is protection of something more valuable than money. You think you are helping. You are actually destroying trust itself. The master and slave dynamic in finance is not metaphor. It is mechanical reality. The person who owes money loses freedom of decision. They cannot take risks. They cannot refuse unreasonable requests. They cannot speak truth when truth might offend. Every choice becomes filtered through one question: will this jeopardize my ability to repay? That filter rewrites personality. It turns confident people into anxious people. It turns generous people into calculating people. Debt does not just take your money. It takes your character and replaces it with survival instinct. Most people do not realize they have entered slavery until they try to leave. They want to change jobs, but the debt payment requires current income. They want to start a business, but the loan obligation eliminates risk capacity. They want to say no to exploitation, but saying no might trigger consequences they cannot afford. The chains are invisible, but the weight is real. This is what Solomon saw. This is what modern culture deliberately hides. Consider the historical context. Ancient Jewish law in Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 1 through 2, commanded debt forgiveness every 7 years. The sabbatical year wiped all debts clean between Israelites. Why? Because God knew debt compounds faster than most people can earn. He built a reset mechanism into the economy itself. Every 7th year, all debts between brothers were canceled. The slate wiped clean. No bankruptcy court. No credit score. Just release. That was not charity. That was economic design intended to prevent permanent underclasses. Modern lending does the opposite. It creates permanent obligation. Credit cards charge interest rates that would have been called usury in every civilization until 50 years ago. Student loans follow borrowers into retirement. Mortgages stretch across 30 years, meaning you pay for the house twice through interest alone. The system is not designed to help you build wealth or survive inflation. Whether you call it the snowball method or the avalanche method, the math remains the same. You cannot out-earn a system designed to extract your future. Your purchasing power shrinks while your debt balance grows. That is not an accident. That is the design. Personal loans destroy relationships because they turn friendship into commerce. You cannot maintain equal standing with someone who holds your debt. The power imbalance corrupts everything. Imagine borrowing $5,000 from your brother. 6 months later, he asks you to help him move on a weekend you plan to rest. Can you say no? Technically, yes. Practically, no. The debt hovers. You feel obligated beyond the money. That is the hidden cost. That is what Solomon warned against. Charlie Munger taught inversion. Do not focus only on what creates success. Focus on what creates failure, then avoid it religiously. What creates financial failure faster than almost anything else? Debt, especially consumer debt, especially debt taken for purchases that lose value. Munger studied bankruptcies. The pattern was always the same. People borrowed against future income they were not guaranteed to earn. Then circumstances changed, and the debt remained while the income vanished. Here is what most financial advisors will not tell you. The greatest financial move you can make is often the one you do not make. The purchase you skip, the loan you refuse, the co-signing you decline. Inversion applied to money means asking not what you can afford, but what you cannot afford to owe. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. Let us see how far Solomon's warning has traveled across the world. Now we go deeper into the mathematics of slavery. Compound interest is called the eighth wonder of the world when it works for you. It becomes the eighth circle of hell when it works against you. Every month you carry a balance. Interest accrues on the principal plus previous interest. The debt grows exponentially. This is not opinion. This is mathematical law. A $10,000 credit card balance at 18% interest, paying only minimums, takes 23 years to eliminate and costs over $13,000 in interest alone. You paid $23,000 for $10,000 of spending. That is not borrowing. That is voluntary enslavement to time and percentage. Solomon understood this without modern calculators. He watched merchants in Jerusalem's markets. He saw how quickly small debts became large debts when left unpaid. He knew that owing money creates a second job, the job of repaying. That second job pays no wage. It only extracts. You work to earn, then you work again to repay what you already spent. The treadmill never stops unless you stop feeding it. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 1 through 5 delivers one of Scripture's most urgent warnings about surety and co-signing. My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, if you have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger, you have been trapped by what you said, ensnared by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, to free yourself, since you have fallen into your neighbor's hands. Go, humble yourself. Press your plea with your neighbor. Allow no sleep to your eyes, no slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself, like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of the fowler. Notice the urgency, like a gazelle fleeing a hunter, like a bird escaping a trap. That is how seriously Solomon treated financial obligation on behalf of another. Why? Because when you co-sign, you accept full liability with zero control. The other person makes decisions. You absorb consequences. If they default, the lender comes to you. Your credit suffers. Your assets risk seizure. You gave away power over your future to someone else's choices. This is where we must speak of Solomon himself, not as legend, but as historical proof. Solomon's wealth exceeded that of every king in the known world. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 14 records that the weight of gold that came to Solomon yearly was 666 talents of gold. 1 talent equals approximately 75 pounds. That means Solomon received nearly 50,000 pounds of gold annually, equivalent to over $1 billion in today's value, from trade alone. This does not count his silver, livestock, land, or tributes from surrounding nations. How did Solomon accumulate such wealth? Not through borrowing, through production, trade, wisdom-based treaties, and resource management. He built a merchant fleet. He established trade routes. He taxed commerce flowing through Israel's strategic geographic position. Every decision multiplied value rather than extracting it. He understood that real wealth comes from creating surplus, not managing deficit. Yet even with infinite resources at his disposal, Solomon's financial teaching focused obsessively on avoiding debt. Why would the richest man alive warn so intensely about something he never needed? Because he watched kingdoms collapse around him. He saw nations borrow gold to fund wars, then lose sovereignty when they could not repay. He witnessed families destroyed when fathers borrowed against future harvests that droughts prevented. Wealth gave him perspective. He could see the pattern others missed while drowning in it. If Solomon, with endless gold, said, "Avoid debt like poison," what does that tell you about debt's nature? It tells you debt is not primarily a math problem. It is a spiritual problem. It rewrites your relationship with time, risk, and purpose. It turns you from builder into maintainer, from creator into manager of obligation. The psychological burden of owing money is heavier than the financial burden. Money you owe sits in your mind like a stone. It disrupts sleep. It flavors every good moment with underlying anxiety. You receive a bonus at work, and instead of celebration, you feel the pull of debt waiting to consume it. That is not freedom. That is carrying someone else's claim on your future everywhere you go. Benjamin Graham wrote The Intelligent Investor as a manual for rational decision-making in markets. His core principle: margin of safety. Never invest borrowed money. Never use leverage beyond your capacity to absorb total loss. Why? Because leverage amplifies both gains and losses. When you borrow to invest, you remove the safety buffer that protects you from catastrophic mistakes. One bad decision does not just lose your money. It loses your money plus the borrowed money plus the interest on that borrowed money. The mathematics of leverage work beautifully in theory. They destroy lives in practice because theory assumes perfect decisions and markets assume chaos. Graham studied the Great Depression. He watched fortunes evaporate in days because men borrowed against stocks to buy more stocks. When prices fell, margin calls forced selling, which drove prices lower, which triggered more margin calls. The leverage spiral devoured everything. Graham concluded that the single most important factor in investment survival is avoiding permanent loss of capital. Debt creates permanent loss risk because it demands repayment regardless of asset performance. This connects directly to Solomon. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 5 says, "It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. A loan is a vow. You vow to repay. If circumstances prevent fulfillment, you have not just failed financially. You have broken your word. That fracture cuts deeper than bankruptcy. It damages something internal. Now, consider opportunity cost. Every dollar sent to debt repayment is a dollar that cannot compound in your favor. If you pay $500 monthly toward credit card debt for 5 years, that is $30,000 in payments. If you had instead invested that same $500 monthly at 8% annual return, you would have accumulated over $36,000. The difference is not just $30,000 versus $36,000. The difference is negative $30,000 versus positive $36,000. A $66,000 swing in net worth from one decision made 5 years ago. This is why Solomon said the borrower is slave to the lender. The slave works, but the master owns the output. You earn, but the lender owns first claim on your earnings. You are not working for yourself. You are working for whoever holds your debt. That is definitional slavery, softened by the illusion that you chose it. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, preached financial discipline as spiritual discipline. He said, "Earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can." Notice the order. Earning comes first. Saving comes second. Giving comes third. Borrowing appears nowhere in the formula. Wesley understood that debt reverses the sequence. When you borrow, giving stops first, then saving stops, then earning becomes insufficient. The entire system collapses inward. How do you politely refuse a loan request? You tell the truth with compassion. You say, "I love you, and because I love you, I will not create a dynamic that could damage our relationship. I have watched debt destroy friendships. I will not risk ours. If you need help, I will help you create a plan to earn or save what you need. But I will not become your lender." That boundary is not rejection. That boundary is protection for both of you. John Calvin wrote extensively on the theology of work. He taught that capital is not neutral. Capital used for production honors God. Capital used for consumption dishonors the gift of provision. When you borrow to buy something that loses value, you are consuming future productivity for present pleasure. You are eating tomorrow's seed instead of planting it. Calvin saw this as theft against your future self. You are stealing from the person you will become. This distinction matters. A mortgage to buy a home that provides shelter and potential appreciation is fundamentally different from a credit card balance used to finance a vacation. One creates or preserves value. The other destroys value and leaves obligation. Most modern debt falls into the second category. People borrow to maintain lifestyles they have not yet earned. Breaking the generational cycle of borrowing requires teaching through modeling. Your children do not learn financial discipline from lectures. They learn it from watching how you handle money. If they see you stressed about payments, they internalize debt as normal. If they see you delay gratification and save toward goals, they internalize patience as power. The pattern you establish becomes their default assumption about how adults manage resources. This is the foundation of true financial peace. It is not just about math, it is about freedom. Charles Spurgeon called debt a bottomless pit. He preached that borrowing presumes upon providence. You are assuming God will provide income you do not yet have to repay obligations you are creating now. That assumption replaces faith with presumption. Faith says God will provide what I need when I need it. Presumption says I will create the need now and force God to provide later. Spurgeon saw that distinction as spiritually dangerous. Consider how modern financial masters unknowingly validated Solomon. John Bogle founded Vanguard on the principle of low-cost index investing. His entire philosophy rested on eliminating unnecessary fees and avoiding leverage. Bogle studied market history and concluded that most investors harm themselves through activity and debt. The winning strategy is passive accumulation with zero borrowed money. He never cited Proverbs, but he lived it. Charlie Munger avoided debt his entire life. He bought undervalued assets with cash and held them for decades. When asked about leverage, he said, "I have a friend who says the first rule of fishing is fish where the fish are. The second rule is, do not forget the first rule. The first rule of money is do not lose money. Debt creates loss risk. Therefore, avoid debt." Simple, brutal, effective. Sir John Templeton built one of the greatest investment records of the 20th century. His method: buy when others panic, sell when others celebrate, and never use borrowed money. Templeton was deeply religious. He prayed before every major decision. He saw financial discipline as spiritual discipline. He understood that debt clouds judgment because it creates urgency where patience should exist. These men never met Solomon. They probably never studied Proverbs intensely. Yet their methods aligned perfectly with his warnings. Why? Because truth is universal. Mathematical reality does not change across centuries. Borrowing creates fragility. Saving creates resilience. That principle worked in ancient Jerusalem. It works in modern markets. It will work wherever humans exchange value. The cloud of witnesses is not just historical, it is active. Every person who breaks free from debt becomes proof that the principle works. Every family that chooses delayed gratification over instant consumption becomes a living sermon. You are not just managing your money. You are writing a testimony that others will read through your choices. We arrive at the final lesson. Debt is not just a financial problem. It is a faith problem. It reveals what you believe about provision. When you borrow, you declare that God's timing is insufficient, so you will create your own timing through credit. That is not evil. That is human. But it is still a statement of distrust disguised as practicality. Solomon saw this clearly. His entire book of Proverbs returns repeatedly to the theme of patience producing wealth, while haste produces poverty. Proverbs chapter 21 verse 5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty." Debt is haste made financial. It is the refusal to wait. It is the demand that future resources serve present desires. C.H. Spurgeon preached that debt exchanges temporary relief for permanent burden. The relief lasts days or weeks. The burden lasts years. That exchange rate is always catastrophic. Yet millions make it daily because the pain of waiting feels worse than the pain of owing. Until the pain of owing arrives. Then they realize waiting was mercy. If you are in debt now, hear this. You are not condemned. You are in a trap, but traps can be escaped. The first step is admitting the trap exists. The second step is refusing to dig deeper. No new debt. None. The third step is systematic elimination. Smallest balance first or highest interest first, whichever creates momentum. The fourth step is building margin so the cycle cannot restart. You create an emergency fund not because you are afraid, but because you are wise. You prepare for the famine so you never have to beg during the harvest.